Title: The Will and the Way. Unearthing the truth about Elias Thorne. Subreddit: r/true stories r/relationships r/unresolved mysteries. Cross-posted where relevant throughout. Post 1. A funeral revelation, day 1. Okay, Reddit, I need to get this off my chest. I'm still reeling, and honestly, I'm not sure what to think. It all started at a funeral yesterday. Elias Thorne. The name probably doesn't ring a bell for most of you. He was a pillar of our community here in Havenwood, a small town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Philanthropist, volunteer extraordinaire. The kind of guy who always had a smile and a helping hand for anyone in need. He funded the new library wing, spearheaded the food bank drives, and even personally helped rebuild houses after the flood last year. Everyone loved Elias. He died unexpectedly last week, a sudden heart attack. The funeral at Cypress Grove Cemetery was packed. The mayor gave a eulogy. Local business owners spoke of his generosity, and his family, wife, 2 grown kids, seemed genuinely devastated. The atmosphere was thick with sadness and respect. You know, the kind of funeral where everyone's trying to be strong, but you can feel the collective grief hanging in the air. Then she showed up, an older black woman, dressed in a simple but elegant emerald green dress. She stood apart from the crowd, near the back. You could tell she wasn't one of us. Not in a bad way, but Havenwood, let's be honest, isn't exactly a melting pot. People noticed her, but no one really acknowledged her. They whispered, glanced, but mostly just pretended she wasn't there. After the pastor finished his prayer, she started moving forward, slowly. The crunch of the gravel path was the only sound as people parted to let her through. She reached the casket, placed a single red rose on top, and then turned to face us. "My name is Serafina Dubois," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And I knew Elias Thorne better than any of you." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. You could hear a pin drop. Serafina Dubois? Nobody knew this woman. What was she doing? "Before today ends," she continued, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces, "you'll understand why I'm here. And you'll understand the Elias Thorne most of you never knew." And that, Reddit, is when things got really interesting. I'm posting this because I'm completely thrown. Who is Serafina Dubois? What did she mean? And what secrets was Elias Thorne, the man we all admired, hiding? I'll update as soon as I can. TLDR. Pillar of the community dies. Mysterious woman appears at the funeral claiming to know him better than anyone and hinting at hidden truths. Questions. Who is Serafina Dubois? What secrets was Elias Thorne hiding? What kind of Elias Thorne did the community not know? Post 2. Montgomery, 1967, Day 1, Update 1. Okay, everyone, buckle up. Serafina's story was intense. She started by transporting us back to Montgomery, Alabama, in 1967. She spoke of a time when racial injustice was blatant and brutal, when people like her were actively denied basic human rights. According to Serafina, was a young, idealistic teacher back then, but his true passion lay in the civil rights movement. He wasn't just passively supportive, he was actively involved, organizing sit-ins, participating in marches, risking his own safety and career to fight for equality. "That's where we crossed paths," Serafina said, her voice filled with both pride and pain. "On the steps of a church, organizing a voter registration drive. Elias wasn't afraid to stand beside me, even when it meant losing his job, facing threats, facing worse." A wave of murmurs went through the crowd. This Elias Thorne? The man who donated generously to local charities, who always had a kind word for everyone. It just didn't compute. He'd never mentioned any of this. Serafina continued. "We weren't just comrades in the fight for justice. We were family. When the world seemed determined to tear us apart, Elias was there. When I lost my sister to a bombing, he held me together. And I was there for him when he was ostracized, when his own family turned their backs on him for his beliefs." She paused, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her hat. "We shared meals, stories, tears. He called me his sister in every way that mattered, even when it wasn't safe for him to say it out loud." The air was thick with emotion. People were starting to connect the dots. realizing that the Elias Thorne they knew had a past they couldn't have imagined. But Serafina wasn't finished. "What I'm telling you isn't just about the past," she said, her voice growing firmer. "It's about the man he became because of those struggles. The sacrifices he made, the price he paid for standing up for what was right." And then she dropped the next bombshell. TLDR. Serafina reveals Elias's involvement in the civil rights movement, his personal sacrifices, and their deep bond. Questions. What specific sacrifices did Elias make? Why did he never talk about his past? What other secrets does Serafina know? Post 3. The Price of Conviction, Day 1, Update 2. The silence after Serafina's last statement was deafening. You could feel the weight of her words pressing down on everyone. "In 1967, she began, her voice unwavering. Elias lost his job for attending a march in Selma. The school board called it unbecoming conduct. We all knew what it really was, retribution." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Imagine the shock. In today's climate, it seems impossible. But back then, this was the risk and reality. She continued, "He didn't tell anyone here about it. He didn't want pity. He packed up what little he had and moved into a tiny, rundown apartment on the south side of Montgomery. He lived there scraping by on tutoring gigs, never once abandoning the fight." Serafina's voice cracked slightly. "When my own house was firebombed in retaliation for hosting meetings, it was Elias who showed up in the middle of the night. He drove me and my 2 nephews to safety, without hesitation, knowing full well the risk." She turned back to the casket, her expression softening. That's who Elias was. Not the polished man in the tailored suit most of you remember. Someone who walked through fire for the people he cared about. She then pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse. "This," she said, holding it up, "is a letter Elias wrote to me in 1972. I want to read just one part to you." With trembling hands, she unfolded the letter and began to read, her voice filled with emotion. "Serafina, you are the sister I chose when life gave me none. We have shared burdens no one should bear, but I would carry them again for you, without question. You remind me every day that love is not about blood. It's about who shows up when the world turns its back." Her voice broke on the last line, and she paused to regain her composure. The crowd, previously so stoic, was now visibly shaken. Some were dabbing at their eyes. Others stared at the ground in shame. "Elias never turned his back on anyone," Serafina said, folding the letter again. "Not even when it cost him everything. And yet, how many of you here knew any of this? How many of you cared enough to ask?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. It was a direct challenge to the community, a reminder that they had only seen the surface of a man who had lived a life of profound sacrifice. But as the truth of Elias's sacrifices sank in, Serafina revealed something even more shocking, a secret that would redefine his legacy forever. TLDR. Serafina reveals Elias lost his job for his activism, risked his life to save her, and shares a poignant excerpt from a letter he wrote her. Questions. What was the something even more shocking that Serafina hinted at? What was Elias doing during those years between Alabama and his eventual move to Havenwood? Why did Elias keep his past a secret? Post 4. The Hidden Sun, Day 1. Update 3, Cliffhanger. The air felt thicker, heavier as Serafina continued. Her words were laced with both sorrow and defiance. "He didn't just survive those times, we fought through them. But that fight demanded sacrifices that left marks on both of us, marks most of you would never see." She glanced at the crowd, her piercing eyes meeting theirs as if daring anyone to look away. Then she dropped the bomb. "There's one more truth about Elias," she announced, her voice unwavering. "A truth none of you would have guessed. Yet it's one that shaped everything he stood for." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Serafina took a steadying breath. "Elias didn't just fight for others," she declared. "He fought a battle no one could see. For years, he hid the fact that he was supporting a child, a son, he couldn't openly claim because of who the mother was." The whispers grew louder, disbelief washing over the faces in the crowd. Elias? A secret child? It seemed impossible. Serafina continued, her voice soft but resolute. His son, Jamar, was born to a woman Elias couldn't marry because of the time and place they lived in. The boy was black, like me, and Elias was forced to keep it quiet for fear of what it would do to his career, his reputation in certain circles. She added, I was there when Jamar was born, and Elias made sure that boy never went without. He paid for his schooling, wrote letters every week, visited whenever he could under the cover of darkness. He made sure Jamar had everything he never had growing up, a father's love, even if it had to be a quiet one. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice stayed strong. And Jamar, the man you didn't know existed, is here today. At that, a tall man stepped forward from the back of the crowd. He was commanding, dignified, and the resemblance to Elias was unmistakable. The crowd turned, stunned, into silence. Jamar walked up to Serafina and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion, for everything. Serafina smiled at him through her tears. It was always my honor. She turned back to the group, addressing them once more. Elias loved all of you, in his way, but his truest love was for the people he fought for, those of us who didn't have the luxury of being seen in polite society. That's why I'm here today, to make sure you know the real man behind all the accolades. The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was reflection, a reckoning with the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. But the story doesn't end there. Just when I thought I'd heard it all, Serafina dropped another bombshell. A secret condition in Elias's will, directly related to his hidden son and his past sacrifices. I'll post about that as soon as I can process what happened. TLDR. Serafina reveals Elias had a secret son, Jamar, whom he supported in secret due to the racial prejudice of the time. Jamar then appears. Questions. What is the secret condition in Elias's will? What was Jamar's relationship like with Elias? How will this revelation affect Elias's family and his legacy in Havenwood? Post 5. The Will and the Way, Day 2. Okay, Reddit. Sorry for the delay. Yesterday was a lot. After Jamar revealed himself, the reactions were mixed. Some people were openly hostile, whispering about illegitimate children and scandal. Others seemed genuinely touched, realizing the depth of Elias's character. Elias's wife and children, I have to say, were remarkably composed. Shocked, yes, but composed. Then, the lawyer stepped forward. He announced that there was a codicil to Elias's will, one that specifically addressed the revelation Serafina had made. The lawyer explained that a significant portion of Elias's estate was to be placed in a trust specifically for community development projects and scholarships for underprivileged youth in Havenwood. That part wasn't a surprise. Elias was always generous. But here's the kicker. The only way the trust would be funded was if Jamar agreed to become one of the trustees. The room erupted. Elias's legitimate children were furious. They saw it as an insult, a betrayal of their father's memory. They argued that Jamar, a stranger, shouldn't have any control over their inheritance, over their father's legacy. Jamar, to his credit, remained calm. He explained that he wasn't interested in the money. He had a successful career as an architect in Atlanta. He was there to honor his father's memory, to ensure that his father's wishes were carried out. Serafina spoke up, her voice ringing with authority. Elias knew what he was doing. He knew that including Jamar was the only way to guarantee that the trust would truly serve the community, the entire community. He knew that his own children, bless their hearts, might not fully understand the struggles of those who were marginalized, those who were overlooked. The tension was palpable. It was a battle for Elias's legacy, a clash between the sanitized version of his life that Havenwood had embraced and the complex, messy truth that Serafina had revealed. So, here's where things stand. Jamar has to decide whether or not to accept the role of trustee. If he does, the trust is funded, and Elias's vision for Havenwood will be realized. If he refuses, the money goes to Elias's children, and the community development projects are scrapped. What would you do? TLDR, Elias's will includes a trust for community development, but it's only funded if Jamar agrees to be a trustee, creating conflict with Elias's other children. Questions. What will Jamar decide? Will Elias's children accept Jamar's involvement? What are the potential consequences for Havenwood if Jamar refuses? Why did Elias choose this specific condition for the trust? What will Jamar's role involve, and will he remain in the town? Is there more of the estate intended for Jamar, or is he only being granted this role as trustee? Post 6, A Father's Vision, Day 3. Okay, an update. Jamar has made his decision. He's accepted the role of trustee. The room was silent when he announced it. You could practically see the gears turning in people's heads. Some were relieved, some were angry, and some were simply confused. Jamar explained his reasoning. He said that he wasn't doing it for the money or the power. He was doing it for his father. "My father taught me the importance of giving back," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "He showed me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the impact you have on the lives of others. He couldn't be there for me in the way he wanted when I was growing up, but he made sure I had everything I needed. This is my chance to repay that debt, to honor his memory by continuing his work." He also addressed Elias's children directly. "I understand your anger, your resentment," he said. "I don't expect you to accept me as a brother, but I hope that we can work together for the good of this community, for the sake of our father's legacy." His words seemed to soften some of the tension in the room. Elias's daughter, Sarah, even offered him a tentative smile. His son, David, remained stoic, but he didn't object. The lawyer then outlined the terms of the trust. It was substantial, enough to fund meaningful projects and scholarships for years to come. The focus would be on providing opportunities for underprivileged youth, particularly those from marginalized communities. There would be after-school programs, mentorship initiatives, and college scholarships. Jamar would have a significant say in how the money was spent, but he would also be working with a board of community representatives. The goal was to ensure that the trust was truly serving the needs of Havenwood. Serafina, watching from the sidelines, seemed satisfied. She had accomplished what she set out to do, to reveal the full truth about Elias Thorne and to ensure that his legacy of generosity and social justice would continue. But I have a feeling this is just the beginning. Jamar is an outsider, a black man from Atlanta, suddenly thrust into a position of power in a small, predominantly white town. There are bound to be challenges, resistance, and maybe even outright hostility. And I can't help but wonder what else is out there. What other secrets did Elias Thorne take to his grave? TLDR, Jamar accepts the role of trustee, and the community begins to grapple with the implications of his decision. Questions. What challenges will Jamar face as trustee? Will Elias's children ever truly accept Jamar? What other secrets might be revealed? Will Serafina leave the town? What were the terms of Elias's will, and how much of his estate was set aside for the trust? What were the specific goals of the trust? Who will be the other members of the board of community representatives? Did Elias specify particular groups or causes to be supported? Post 7. Whispers and Shadows, Day 4. Things in Havenwood are tense. Jamar's decision has definitely stirred things up. There's a clear divide in town. On one side, you have people who are genuinely excited about the prospect of positive change, who see Jamar as a breath of fresh air. On the other side, you have people who are resistant to change, who resent Jamar's presence, and who whisper about outsiders and reverse discrimination. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the funeral and the revelations about Elias's past. They framed it as a story of redemption, of a man who dedicated his life to fighting for equality. But the online comment section was a cesspool of racism and resentment. Jamar has been trying to reach out to the community, attending town hall meetings, meeting with local leaders, and listening to people's concerns. He's articulate, intelligent, and genuinely committed to making a difference. But he's facing an uphill battle. Elias's children, Sarah and David, have been surprisingly supportive, at least publicly. They've issued statements praising Jamar's commitment to their father's legacy and pledging to work with him to ensure the success of the trust. But I can't help but sense a lingering tension beneath the surface. I've also noticed some strange things happening around town. There's been a series of anonymous flyers posted around Havenwood, spreading misinformation about Jamar and questioning his motives. Someone vandalized the local community center with graffiti that read, Go back where you came from. And last night, I saw a group of men gathered outside Jamar's hotel, watching him. They were the same guys who had been making racist comments at the town hall meeting. I'm starting to get worried. I think Jamar might be in danger. TLDR. Tension rises in Havenwood as Jamar faces resistance and possible threats after becoming trustee. Questions. Who is behind the anonymous flyers and vandalism? What are the specific concerns being raised about Jamar? Will Elias's children remain supportive, or will their resentment resurface? What will Jamar do about the threats? Is there a deeper, hidden conflict within the town that's being triggered by Jamar's arrival? Post 8. Echoes of the Past, Day 5. I dug a little deeper. I needed to know more about Elias Thorne's life in Montgomery. Serafina Dubois had opened a door to a world that Havenwood had never seen, and I felt compelled to explore it. I found some old newspaper articles online about the civil rights movement in Alabama. Elias's name appeared in several of them. He was described as a courageous young teacher who stood up for justice in the face of adversity. One article mentioned that Elias had been targeted by the Ku Klux Klan. His house had been vandalized, and he had received numerous death threats. I also found an old yearbook photo of Elias from his high school in Montgomery. He looked so young, so idealistic, so full of hope. It was hard to reconcile that image with the polished philanthropist I knew. Then I stumbled upon something truly shocking. A police report from 1968. It described an incident in which Elias had been arrested for protesting segregation at a local diner. According to the report, Elias had been beaten by police officers and held in jail overnight. But the most disturbing thing was the name of the arresting officer, Deputy Sheriff Roy Caldwell. Roy Caldwell is still alive. He's a prominent figure in Havenwood. He's the head of the local historical society, a respected member of the community. He was even at Elias's funeral, offering his condolences to the family. Could Roy Caldwell be behind the threats against Jamar? Could he be trying to silence the truth about Elias's past? I have a bad feeling about this. TLDR. The poster uncovers evidence of Elias's activism in Montgomery and discovers that a man who arrested him during the civil rights movement now lives in Havenwood. Questions. Is Roy Caldwell involved in the threats against Jamar? What other secrets is Roy Caldwell hiding? Will the discovery of this information put the poster in danger? Was Roy Caldwell aware of Jamar's link to Elias when attending the funeral? Was the police report publicly available at the time of the original incident? Post 9. Confrontation Day 6. I couldn't let it go. I had to confront Roy Caldwell. I found him at the Historical Society, surrounded by old photographs and documents. He greeted me with a smile, but I could see a flicker of unease in his eyes when I mentioned Elias Thorne. I showed him the police report. He stared at it for a long time, his face growing pale. I don't remember that, he stammered. Don't lie to me, I said. You arrested Elias Thorne for protesting segregation. You beat him. You held him in jail overnight. He sighed. It was a long time ago, he said. Things were different back then. I was just doing my job. Your job? I asked, my voice rising. Your job was to uphold a system of racial oppression. Your job was to deny people their basic human rights. He shook his head. I didn't make the rules, he said. I just enforced them. That's not good enough, I said. You had a choice. You could have stood up for what was right. You could have refused to participate in injustice. But you didn't. And now, years later, you're still trying to silence the truth. I told him about the threats against Jamar, about the anonymous flyers and the vandalism. I asked him if he was involved. He denied it, of course, but I could see the guilt in his eyes. I may not agree with what's happening now, he said, but I'm not involved in any of that. I didn't believe him. I left the Historical Society feeling angry and frustrated. I knew that Roy Caldwell was hiding something. I just didn't know what. TLDR. The poster confronts Roy Caldwell with the police report, and Caldwell denies involvement in the threats against Jamar, but seems guilty. Questions. What is Roy Caldwell hiding? Will Roy Caldwell retaliate against the poster for confronting him? What evidence can the poster find to prove Roy Caldwell's involvement? Were there any other police officers involved at the time of the original incident? Why didn't Elias reveal this event when arriving in Havenwood? Are there legal ramifications for Roy Caldwell's past actions? Post 10. Following the money, Day 7. I decided to take a different approach. I started digging into Roy Caldwell's financial records. It wasn't easy. He's a wealthy man with a complex network of investments and holdings. But I'm good with computers, and I have a few friends who work in the financial industry. After a few days of digging, I found something interesting. A series of large donations to a local organization called the Havenwood Heritage Foundation. The organization claims to be dedicated to preserving the town's history. But its board members are all known to be staunch conservatives, many with ties to white supremacist groups. The donations started shortly after Jamar was named trustee of Elias's trust. They were anonymous, but I had a strong suspicion that they came from Roy Caldwell. I also discovered that Roy Caldwell had been funneling money into a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. The corporation had no apparent business purpose, but it had been used to fund a series of anonymous attacks against progressive politicians and organizations across the country. It was becoming clear that Roy Caldwell was more than just a grumpy old man clinging to the past. He was a dangerous extremist with deep pockets and a hidden agenda. TLDR. The poster uncovers evidence that Roy Caldwell is funding a local conservative organization and funneling money into a shell corporation used to attack progressive causes. Questions. What is Roy Caldwell's ultimate goal? How will the poster expose Roy Caldwell's activities? Are there other influential people in Havenwood who are involved in Roy Caldwell's scheme? How can Jamar protect himself and the community from Roy Caldwell's influence? Post 11. A Family Secret, Day 8. I decided to reach out to Elias's daughter, Sarah. I figured she might know something about Roy Caldwell's connection to her father. She was hesitant at first, but eventually, she agreed to meet me for coffee. I showed her the evidence I had gathered about Roy Caldwell's activities. She was shocked. I had no idea, she said. I always thought Roy was just a harmless old man. She told me that her father had never spoken about his experiences in Montgomery. He had always been a private person, reluctant to share his past. But then, she revealed something that changed everything. There was one thing he did tell me, she said. He told me that he had a falling out with his own father over his involvement in the civil rights movement. According to Sarah, Elias's father had been a staunch segregationist, a wealthy businessman who profited from the exploitation of black people. He had disowned Elias for his beliefs. My father always regretted that, Sarah said. He wanted to reconcile with his father before he died, but he never got the chance. It suddenly clicked. Roy Caldwell wasn't just a random bigot. He was a connection to Elias's past, a symbol of the family conflict that had haunted him for so many years. Could Elias's own father have been involved in the threats against Jamar? Could he have been secretly funding Roy Caldwell's activities? I had a new lead. TLDR. The poster learns that Elias had a falling out with his own segregationist father, suggesting a possible link between the father and Roy Caldwell. Questions. Is Elias's father still alive? If so, is he involved in the threats against Jamar? What was the nature of Elias's relationship with his father? What other secrets is Sarah hiding? What was the name of Elias's father, and can his current finances be investigated? How much did Sarah and David truly know about their father and grandfather? Post 12. The Old Man and the Money, Day 9. I tracked down Elias's father. His name is Arthur Thorne, and he's 92 years old. He lives in a gated community in Florida, surrounded by wealth and privilege. I managed to get a phone number for him, and I called him. He was reluctant to talk at first, but when I mentioned Elias's name, he became more receptive. I asked him about his relationship with his son. He was dismissive, calling Elias a rebel and a disappointment. I asked him about his views on the civil rights movement. He launched into a tirade about communists and agitators who were trying to destroy the American way of life. I asked him about Roy Caldwell. He paused. I know Roy, he said. He's a good man, a patriot. I asked him if he had ever given Roy Caldwell any money. He denied it, but I didn't believe him. I decided to fly to Florida to confront Arthur Thorne in person. I needed to see his face when I asked him the tough questions. TLDR. The poster tracks down Elias's father, Arthur Thorne, who expresses contempt for his son and praises Roy Caldwell. Questions. Will Arthur Thorne admit to funding Roy Caldwell? What other secrets is Arthur Thorne hiding? Will Arthur Thorne take action against the poster for investigating him? Was Arthur Thorne aware of the existence of Jamar? Are there others within Arthur Thorne's social circle who are aware of his involvement and could be working with him to silence Elias's truth? Post 13. Face to Face, Day 10. I arrived in Florida and drove to Arthur Thorne's gated community. It was like stepping into another world. Manicured lawns, sparkling pools, and rows of identical McMansions. I found Arthur Thorne sitting on his patio, sipping a cocktail. He looked frail and withered, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. I introduced myself and told him that I was investigating his son's life. He scowled. "I told you everything I needed to tell you on the phone," he said. "Now get off my property." I refused to leave. I showed him the evidence I had gathered about Roy Caldwell, about the Havenwood Heritage Foundation, about the Shell Corporation in the Cayman Islands. He remained defiant. "I don't know anything about that," he said. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I pressed him harder. I told him that I knew he had been funding Roy Caldwell's activities, that he was trying to silence the truth about his son's legacy. He finally cracked. "Fine," he said. "So, what if I gave Roy a little money? It's my money, and I can do whatever I want with it." I asked him why he was so determined to destroy his own son's reputation. "He betrayed me," Arthur Thorne said, his voice filled with venom. "He turned his back on his family, on his heritage. He sided with those people. Those people meant black people, civil rights activists, anyone who challenged the status quo. Arthur Thorne was a true believer in white supremacy. He couldn't accept that his son had rejected his values. He then said something that chilled me to the bone. Elias made a mistake, he said, and now his mistake is coming back to haunt him. TLDR. The poster confronts Arthur Thorne in person, who admits to funding Roy Caldwell and reveals his racist ideology. Questions. What does Arthur Thorne mean by Elias's mistake is coming back to haunt him? Is Arthur Thorne planning something even more sinister? Will Arthur Thorne reveal other people involved in his scheme? Is there an asset trail of money to track back? Are there any legal ramifications for Arthur Thorne's comments and actions? Post 14. A Dark Plan, Day 11. Arthur Thorne's words haunted me on the flight back to Havenwood. Elias's mistake is coming back to haunt him. What did he mean? I started thinking about Jamar. He was the mistake that Arthur Thorne was referring to. Elias's secret son, the embodiment of his rejection of his father's values. Was Arthur Thorne planning to harm Jamar? I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I decided to call Jamar and warn him. He was skeptical at first, but I told him everything I had learned about Arthur Thorne and Roy Caldwell. He finally agreed to take my concerns seriously. He said he would increase his security and be more careful. But I knew that wasn't enough. Arthur Thorne was a powerful and ruthless man. He wouldn't stop until he had silenced Jamar and erased Elias's legacy. I had to find a way to stop him. TLDR. The poster warns Jamar about Arthur Thorne's plans, fearing he is in danger. Questions. What specific actions is Arthur Thorne planning to take against Jamar? How can the poster protect Jamar? Will Jamar trust the poster and take appropriate precautions? What other allies can the poster find in Havenwood? Post 15. The Trap, Day 12, Cliffhanger. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't wait for Arthur Thorne to make his move. I decided to set a trap. I contacted the local newspaper and told them everything I had learned about Arthur Thorne and Roy Caldwell. I provided them with the evidence I had gathered, including the financial records and the police report. I asked them to publish a story exposing their activities. I knew it would be a risky move, but I was hoping it would force Arthur Thorne's hand. The newspaper agreed to run the story. They said they would publish it the following morning. That night, I received a phone call from an anonymous number. A voice on the other end said, "You're playing a dangerous game. You should have stayed out of this." I hung up the phone and called the police. They said they would investigate, but they couldn't offer me any protection. I knew I was on my own. I packed a bag and left my house. I didn't want to put my family in danger. I drove to Jamar's hotel. I wanted to make sure he was safe. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a group of men surrounding his car. They were the same men I had seen outside his hotel before. They were armed. TLDR. The poster provides evidence to the local newspaper, receives a threat, and finds armed men surrounding Jamar's car. Questions. Will the newspaper publish the story? Will the armed men attack Jamar? Can the poster save Jamar in time? Will the poster involve the police further? What are the armed men planning to do with Jamar? Will other people get hurt? Will it be possible to get video evidence? Post 16, Showdown, Day 13. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the men surround Jamar's car. There were 4 of them, all burly and menacing. They were armed with pistols and looked like they meant business. I had to do something. I slammed my car into reverse and sped towards them, blaring my horn. The men scattered, startled by the sudden noise. I jumped out of my car and yelled at them. "Leave him alone! Get out of here!" They hesitated for a moment, then turned and ran towards a waiting van. I tried to chase them, but they were too fast. I ran to Jamar's car and pounded on the window. "Jamar, are you okay?" He opened the door, his face pale and shaken. "What was that all about?" he asked. "They were trying to hurt you," I said. "I think Arthur Thorne sent them." Jamar shook his head in disbelief. "I can't believe this is happening," he said. "I just wanted to honor my father's memory." "You need to get out of here," I said. "It's not safe for you in Havenwood." "I'm not running," he said. "My father taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's dangerous." I admired his courage, but I was worried about his safety. I knew that Arthur Thorne wouldn't give up easily. We decided to call the police again. This time, they took our concerns more seriously. They sent several officers to the hotel and promised to provide Jamar with protection. But I still didn't trust them. I had a feeling that someone within the police department was working with Arthur Thorne. TLDR. The poster intervenes and prevents an attack on Jamar, alerting the police, but still suspects corruption within the department. Questions. Who are the men who attacked Jamar? Will the police investigation be thorough and unbiased? What is Arthur Thorne's next move? Is Jamar safe in Havenwood? Can a safe place to stay be found for Jamar? How can the potential police corruption be reported? Post 17. The story breaks. Day 13. Update 1. The newspaper story hit the stands this morning. It was a bombshell. The headline screamed, "Local millionaire linked to white supremacist groups." The article detailed Arthur Thorne's financial ties to Roy Caldwell and the Havenwood Heritage Foundation, as well as the Shell Corporation and the Cayman Islands. The story also revealed Elias Thorne's secret son, Jamar, and the controversy surrounding the trust. The reaction in Havenwood was immediate and intense. People were shocked, outraged, and confused. They couldn't believe that a respected member of their community could be involved in such hateful activities. The phone lines at the newspaper and the police department were flooded with calls. People demanded answers. They demanded justice. Arthur Thorne and Roy Caldwell denied the allegations, calling them lies and fake news. But the evidence was overwhelming. The police announced that they were launching an investigation into Arthur Thorne's activities. They also placed Roy Caldwell on administrative leave. It seemed like justice was finally being served, but I knew that Arthur Thorne wouldn't go down without a fight. He had too much to lose. DR. The newspaper publishes the story exposing Arthur Thorne's ties to hate groups, leading to widespread outrage and a police investigation. Questions. Will Arthur Thorne be arrested? What will happen to Roy Caldwell? What will be the long-term impact of the story on Havenwood? Will Arthur Thorne try to flee or destroy evidence? What is the next step in the investigation? Will people in the community start to support Jamar now that the truth is revealed? Post 18. The price of truth. Day 14. Things took a turn for the worse today. I received another phone call from the anonymous number. This time, the voice was more menacing. "You've gone too far," the voice said. "You're going to regret this." I tried to trace the call, but the number was blocked. Later that day, I found my car vandalized. The tires were slashed, and the windows were smashed. Someone had spray-painted the word traitor on the side of the car. I reported the incident to the police, but they didn't seem to care. They said it was just minor vandalism, and that they had more important things to worry about. I realized that I was no longer safe in Havenwood. Arthur Thorne had powerful allies, and they were willing to do anything to protect him. I decided to leave town. I packed a bag and drove to a nearby city. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in Havenwood any longer. I felt guilty for leaving Jamar behind, but I knew that I couldn't help him if I was dead. TLDR. The poster receives a threatening call and finds their car vandalized, leading them to leave Havenwood out of fear for their safety. Questions. Who is making the threatening calls and vandalizing the poster's property? Will the police ever take the threats seriously? What will happen to the poster now that they have left Havenwood? Is there anyone who the poster can trust to help them? Should the poster go to the FBI with what has been discovered? Post 19. The past returns, day 15. I spent the night in a cheap motel trying to figure out what to do next. I felt lost and alone. Then, I received a phone call from Serafina Dubois. She had heard about what was happening in Havenwood, and she was worried about me and Jamar. She told me that she had known Arthur Thorne for many years. She said he was a ruthless and vindictive man who wouldn't hesitate to use violence to protect his interests. She also revealed a shocking secret about Arthur Thorne's past. Arthur Thorne was involved in the bombing that killed my sister, she said. He wasn't the one who planted the bomb, but he helped to finance it. I was stunned. Arthur Thorne had been responsible for the death of Serafina's sister? It was almost too much to comprehend. Serafina said she had evidence to prove it, but she had been afraid to come forward for fear of retaliation. But now, she was willing to risk everything to bring Arthur Thorne to justice. She asked me to meet her in Montgomery. She said she had something important to show me. I agreed to go. I knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't refuse. I had to help Serafina bring Arthur Thorne to justice. TLDR. The poster receives a call from Serafina, who reveals Arthur Thorne's involvement in the bombing that killed her sister and asks the poster to meet her in Montgomery. Questions. What evidence does Serafina have against Arthur Thorne? Will Serafina be in danger if she comes forward? Will the poster and Serafina be able to work together to bring Arthur Thorne to justice? What are the legal ramifications of Arthur Thorne's historical actions? Will Arthur Thorne see the meeting as an opportunity to silence both the poster and Serafina? Post 20. Montgomery again, day 16, cliffhanger. I drove to Montgomery, my mind racing. I couldn't believe how much had happened in the past few weeks. It felt like I was living in a movie. I met Serafina at a small cafe in the heart of the city. She looked tired but determined. She handed me a file. "This is everything I have," she said. "It's enough to put Arthur Thorne away for life." The file contained copies of old documents, letters, and photographs. They painted a chilling picture of Arthur Thorne's involvement in the white supremacist movement. One document was a receipt for a large sum of money that Arthur Thorne had given to a known Klansman just weeks before the bombing that killed Serafina's sister. Another document was a letter from Arthur Thorne to a friend, in which he expressed his hatred for black people and his desire to see them put back in their place. The evidence was damning. As I was reviewing the documents, a car pulled up outside the cafe. 4 men got out. They were the same men who had tried to attack Jamar. They spotted us through the window and started walking towards the cafe. Serafina looked at me, her eyes filled with fear. "They're here," she whispered. "He knows." We were trapped. TLDR. The poster meets Serafina in Montgomery, reviews evidence of Arthur Thorne's involvement in her sister's death, and finds themselves surrounded by the same men who attacked Jamar. Questions. Will the poster and Serafina escape the men? Will they be able to get the evidence to the authorities in time? Will Arthur Thorne finally be brought to justice? What is Arthur Thorne's ultimate goal? Post 21. Cornered, day 17. Adrenaline surged through me. We were trapped, and Arthur Thorne's goons were closing in. Serafina, despite her age, possessed a quiet strength. "We have to move," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "There's a back exit." We scrambled up, Serafina moving with surprising agility. I grabbed the file, clutching it like a lifeline. The cafe owner, a young woman with wide, fearful eyes, pointed us towards a narrow hallway leading to the kitchen. We burst through the kitchen door, startling the cooks, who scattered like startled birds. The back exit was a heavy steel door leading to a narrow alley. As we reached for the handle, we heard the front door of the cafe crash open. "They're here!" I yelled. Serafina heaved open the steel door, and we stumbled into the alley. It was dark and grimy, littered with trash cans and overflowing dumpsters. We ran, our footsteps echoing off the brick walls. We reached the end of the alley and found ourselves on a busy street. Cars whizzed by, oblivious to our plight. We ducked behind a parked car, trying to catch our breath. "We need to get to the police," I said, panting. "No time," Serafina said. "They'll be watching the police station. We need to disappear." She pointed to a nearby bus stop. "We take the number 12 to Oakwood Cemetery. I have a friend there who can help us." I hesitated. Oakwood Cemetery? It sounded like something out of a horror movie. But I trusted Serafina. She knew this city, and she knew what she was doing. We boarded the bus, trying to blend in with the other passengers. I kept glancing out the window, expecting to see the men following us. The bus lurched forward, carrying us away from the cafe and towards the unknown. TLDR. The poster and Serafina escaped the cafe through a back exit and board a bus headed towards Oakwood Cemetery. Questions. Who is Serafina's friend at Oakwood Cemetery? Will the men follow them onto the bus? What is Arthur Thorne's plan? Will Serafina and the poster be able to get the evidence to the authorities? Is it really safe? Or will they be walking into another trap? Post 22. Whispers Among the Graves, Day 18. The bus ride felt like an eternity. Every stop, I held my breath, fearing the men would board. Serafina remained stoic, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery. Finally, we reached Oakwood Cemetery. The bus shuddered to a halt, and we disembarked. The cemetery was vast and sprawling. A city of the dead. Ancient oak trees cast long shadows over the weathered tombstones. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Serafina led me through the maze of graves, her steps sure and steady. We walked for what seemed like hours, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant caw of a crow. Finally, we reached a small, secluded clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a weathered mausoleum. "This is it," Serafina said. "My friend is inside." She approached the mausoleum and knocked on the heavy bronze door. After a moment, the door creaked open. A tall, imposing figure emerged from the darkness. He was an older black man, dressed in a dark suit and wearing a stern expression. "Isaiah," Serafina said, her voice softening. "Thank you for seeing us." Isaiah nodded curtly. "Come in," he said. "We don't have much time." We followed him inside the mausoleum. The air was cold and damp, and the only light came from a single flickering candle. Isaiah turned to me. "You must be the one who's been helping Serafina," he said. "I am Isaiah, and I am in Serafina's debt." He turned to Serafina. "What is it that I can do to help you?" She explained the situation, about Arthur Thorne, the threat to Jamar, and the evidence she possessed. Isaiah listened intently, his face growing darker with each word. When she finished, he was silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "Arthur Thorne is a cancer on this world," he said. "He has caused too much pain and suffering. It is time to stop him." TLDR. The poster and Serafina arrive at Oakwood Cemetery and meet Isaiah, a friend of Serafina's who agrees to help them. Questions. Who is Isaiah, and what is his connection to Serafina? What kind of help can Isaiah provide? What are the dangers of staying in the mausoleum? Will they be able to trust Isaiah completely? Post 23. Isaiah's plan, Day 19. Isaiah began to outline his plan. It was risky, but it was their best chance of bringing Arthur Thorne to justice. "We need to get the evidence to the FBI," he said. "But we can't trust the local authorities. They're probably compromised." He explained that he had a contact at the FBI, a woman named Agent Davies, who he trusted implicitly. He said she was incorruptible and would take their case seriously. "But getting to her won't be easy," he said. "Arthur Thorne has eyes everywhere. We need to be careful." Isaiah's plan involved contacting Agent Davies through a secure channel and arranging a meeting at a neutral location. They would then deliver the evidence to her and let her take it from there. "It's a long shot," Isaiah said, "but it's the only chance we have." He then revealed something that shocked me. He said that he had been investigating Arthur Thorne for years, ever since he learned about his involvement in the bombing that killed Serafina's sister. "I've been waiting for this moment for a long time," he said. I won't let Arthur Thorne escape justice. Isaiah then looked at me. I believe that you are capable and willing to go all of the way. But this is the end of the road for you, my friend. From this moment forward, things will get dangerous, and you are out of your depth. He then turned to Serafina and said to her, we need to protect him. They will stop at nothing. What do you advise we do? TLDR. Isaiah reveals his plan to contact the FBI and bring Arthur Thorne to justice, admitting he has been investigating him for years, and tells the poster that they need to leave immediately for their own safety. Questions. Who is Agent Davies and why does Isaiah trust her? How will they contact Agent Davies securely? What is Isaiah's background, and how did he become involved in investigating Arthur Thorne? Will the FBI take their case seriously? Why is the poster now out of their depth? What will happen to the poster now? Post 24, A Difficult Farewell, Day 20. Serafina looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and concern. Isaiah is right, she said. This is too dangerous for you. You've done more than enough. My stomach churned. I didn't want to abandon them, not when they were so close to achieving justice. But I also knew that I was putting them at risk by staying. I was a liability, an amateur in a game played by professionals. What will happen to me? I asked. Isaiah will make sure you get back to Havenwood safely, Serafina said, but as of now, you can't be seen in the city or in the country. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said. I trust you. Isaiah nodded. I'll make sure you get home safe, he said. But you need to disappear. No phone calls, no emails, no contact with anyone. Just get out of Montgomery and go home. When this is all over, we'll find you. He led me to a hidden passage in the back of the mausoleum. It led to a secret tunnel that connected to the outside world. This tunnel will take you to a nearby road, Isaiah said. There, you'll find a car waiting for you. It will take you out of the city. I shook hands with Isaiah and hugged Serafina. Thank you for everything, I said. I hope you catch that monster. We will, Serafina said, her voice resolute. We will. I stepped into the tunnel and disappeared into the darkness. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I had done the right thing. I had helped to expose a terrible evil, and I had put my trust in the hands of people who were capable of bringing justice to those who deserved it. I just hoped that they would succeed. TLDR. The poster reluctantly agrees to leave Montgomery, and they are escorted through a secret tunnel to a waiting car. Questions. Who is waiting with the car, and can the poster trust them? Will the poster ever see Serafina and Isaiah again? What will the poster do when they get back to Havenwood? What is the secure channel that will be used to contact Agent Davies? Where does the tunnel lead? Post 25, The Getaway, Day 21. The tunnel was damp and claustrophobic. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay. I stumbled through the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. After what seemed like an eternity, I reached the end of the tunnel. I emerged into a dense patch of woods. The air was cool and fresh, a welcome change from the stifling atmosphere of the tunnel. I followed a narrow path through the woods until I reached a dirt road. A black sedan was parked on the side of the road, its engine running. A woman was standing beside the car, smoking a cigarette. She was tall and slender, with short, cropped hair and piercing blue eyes. She wore a black leather jacket and jeans. She looked like she could handle herself. You must be Poster's Reddit name, she said, her voice low and husky. Isaiah sent me. Get in. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I could trust her, but I didn't have any other options. I got into the car, and the woman sped away. We drove in silence for several hours. I didn't know where we were going, and I was too afraid to ask. Finally, the woman spoke. My name is Maria, she said. I'm a friend of Isaiah's. He asked me to get you out of Montgomery safely. I nodded. Thank you, I said. I appreciate it. Don't thank me yet, she said. We're not out of the woods. Arthur Thorne has a lot of resources. He won't give up easily. She explained that she was taking me to a safe house in a nearby state. It was a remote location, far from Havenwood and Montgomery. I would be safe there until the situation with Arthur Thorne was resolved. I felt a surge of relief. I was finally safe, at least for now. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The real battle was just about to begin. TLDR, The poster emerges from the tunnel and is picked up by Maria, a friend of Isaiah's, who is taking them to a safe house. Questions. How does Maria know Isaiah? What is Maria's background? Where is the safe house located? How long will the poster have to stay in the safe house? Will Arthur Thorne be able to find them? Will Maria stay at the safe house with the poster? Post 26. Waiting, day 22. The safe house was a rustic cabin nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains. It was isolated and secluded, surrounded by dense forests and towering peaks. Maria dropped me off at the cabin and gave me a cell phone with a pre-programmed number. "Call this number if you need anything," she said, "but only use it in an emergency. The less contact we have, the better." She then drove away, leaving me alone in the wilderness. The cabin was sparsely furnished with a bed, a table, and a wood-burning stove. There was no electricity or running water. It was like stepping back in time. I spent my days reading, writing, and exploring the surrounding forests. I tried to stay positive, but I couldn't help but worry about Serafina and Isaiah. I wondered if they were safe and if they had managed to contact Agent Davies. I also worried about Jamar. I hoped he was safe in Havenwood and that he was able to continue his father's work. I felt powerless and frustrated. I wanted to do something, anything, to help, but I knew that I had to stay put. I had to trust that Serafina and Isaiah knew what they were doing. Waiting was the hardest part. TLDR. The poster arrives at the safe house and spends their days in isolation, worrying about Serafina, Isaiah, and Jamar. Questions. Will the poster be able to handle the isolation? Will the situation with Arthur Thorne be resolved quickly? Is the safe house truly safe? Will the poster be able to resist the urge to contact the outside world? Will Maria return? Are Serafina and Isaiah still on the run? Post 27. News from Havenwood, day 23. A week passed. I started to lose hope. Had something gone wrong? Then one evening the cell phone rang. My heart leapt into my throat. I answered the phone, my voice trembling. "Hello, it's Maria," the voice on the other end said. "I have some news from Havenwood." My stomach churned. "What is it?" I asked. "Arthur Thorne has been arrested," she said. "The FBI raided his house and found evidence linking him to the bombing that killed Serafina's sister. They also found evidence that he was planning to harm Jamar." I gasped. "They got him," I said. "They finally got him." "Not yet," Maria said. "He's been arrested, but he hasn't been convicted. He has powerful lawyers, and he's going to fight this every step of the way." She then told me that Roy Caldwell had also been arrested. He was charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit assault. "Things are finally starting to turn around in Havenwood," Maria said. "People are outraged by what Arthur Thorne did. They're demanding change." "What about Jamar?" I asked. "Is he safe?" "He's fine," Maria said. "He's working with the community to implement his father's vision for Havenwood. He's become a real leader." I felt a surge of relief. Jamar was safe, and he was making a difference. "What about Serafina and Isaiah?" I asked. "They're safe too," Maria said. "They're staying out of sight for now, but they'll be back soon." "Can I come home?" I asked. Maria hesitated. "Not yet," she said. "Arthur Thorne still has allies out there. It's not safe for you to return to Havenwood. But soon," she said, "you can be patient." But it was enough for now. Justice was being served. And one day, I'd be back in Havenwood with my family and friends. TLDR. Maria calls with news that Arthur Thorne and Roy Caldwell have been arrested, and that Jamar is safe and thriving in Havenwood. Questions. Will Arthur Thorne be convicted? What kind of sentence will Arthur Thorne and Roy Caldwell receive? How will the arrest of Arthur Thorne and Roy Caldwell affect Havenwood in the long term? Will the community finally come together? Post 28. The trial, day 24. Months passed. The trial of Arthur Thorne dominated the news. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of his guilt, including the documents that Serafina had risked her life to obtain. Arthur Thorne's defense team argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that he was being framed by his political enemies. They painted him as a victim of a witch hunt. But the jury didn't buy it. After weeks of deliberation, they found Arthur Thorne guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison, Roy Caldwell was also convicted. He received a lighter sentence, but his reputation was ruined. He was ostracized by the community. Justice had finally been served. TLDR. Arthur Thorne is found guilty and sentenced to life in prison, and Roy Caldwell is also convicted. Questions. Will Arthur Thorne appeal his conviction? What will happen to Arthur Thorne's wealth and assets? Will Roy Caldwell ever be able to rebuild his life? Post 29. Homecoming, day 25. It was finally time to go home. Maria picked me up from the safe house and drove me back to Havenwood. As we approached the town, I felt a lump in my throat. I had been gone for so long, and I didn't know what to expect. As we drove through town, I was amazed by the changes. The Havenwood Heritage Foundation was gone. In its place stood a new community center dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion. The local newspaper had been replaced by a new publication, one that was committed to reporting the truth and holding power accountable. Jamar had transformed Havenwood. He had brought the community together, and he had created a place where everyone felt welcome. Maria dropped me off at my house. My family was waiting for me on the porch. They ran to me and embraced me tightly. It felt good to be home. TLDR. The poster returns to Havenwood and finds that the town has been transformed for the better. Questions. What specific programs and initiatives has Jamar implemented in Havenwood? How has the community changed its attitude towards diversity and inclusion? Will the poster be able to return to their old life? Post 30. The Legacy of Elias Thorne, day 26. A few days later, I attended a ceremony at the new community center. It was dedicated to the memory of Elias Thorne. Jamar spoke about his father's legacy. He talked about his courage, his generosity, and his commitment to social justice. My father wasn't perfect. Jamar said he made mistakes. He kept secrets, but he always tried to do what was right. He taught me the importance of standing up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult. Serafina Dubois was also there. She received a standing ovation when she was introduced. She spoke about her friendship with Elias Thorne. She talked about their shared struggles and their unwavering commitment to equality. Elias Thorne was a true hero, she said. He changed the world one small act of kindness at a time. I looked around at the crowd. I saw people of all races, all backgrounds, all ages. They were united by a common purpose: to create a better future for Havenwood. Elias Thorne's legacy would live on. TLDR. The poster attends a ceremony honoring Elias Thorne's legacy. Questions. Will the poster continue to be involved in the Havenwood community? Will they ever learn the full extent of Elias Thorne's secrets? Will the story of Elias Thorne inspire others to stand up for what is right? Post 31. A Quiet Goodbye, Day 27 series finale. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Maria. She wrote that Serafina Dubois had passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was saddened by the news, but I knew that she had lived a long and fulfilling life. She had witnessed great injustice, but she had never given up hope. She had fought for what was right, and she had helped to bring down a terrible evil. I visited Serafina's grave in Oakwood Cemetery. I placed a single red rose on her headstone. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for everything." I knew that her spirit would live on, in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by her kindness and her courage. I left the cemetery and walked towards the setting sun. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready for it. I had learned a valuable lesson from Elias Thorne and Serafina Dubois, that one person can make a difference, and I was determined to make my difference. Thanks for following along, Reddit. This was a wild ride, and I'm grateful for your support. I hope this story has inspired you to stand up for what is right, even when it's difficult. TLDR. Serafina passes away peacefully, and the poster reflects on the lessons they have learned.